Dante wrote, "The path to paradise begins in hell." Join Deacon Don Prendergast and David Fortin as they discuss the tools men need to build the domestic church and the spiritual weapons to defend it. This is Through the Fire.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Through the Fire. I'm David Fortin, joined by the man himself, Deacon Don Prendergast.
Who's that?
That's
the man
you,
himself.
That's you, big guy. Hey.
Me?
Yeah. Got to say thank you for last week. Remember how I had asked you about some of the things that were going on in my life and how I was not sure? You know, I just want the audience to know they weren't bad things. I mean, they are truly amazing things happening. These are like kind of things that dreams are made of. And I just wasn't quite sure I was ready for them, and they are happening. So more about that.
A lot of cool things.
More about that later.
A lot of cool things are going on. And I listen, I'm right there with you. You know, it's like there's this concept called imposter syndrome.
Yep.
There are some people that don't believe. We talked about it. Yeah. You know, it's the idea like, you know, you have some dreams and aspirations as to how you're hoping things would unfold. And it's like, oh man, as they start to unfold, am I actually prepared for this? Am I ready for this? Am I going to mess it up? And so that's kind of like the whole idea of imposter syndrome. You know, you get the promotion. Oh boy, now I got to do the job.
And you know what it was? It was the sister that you were telling me about, that she had her gifts. And
oh, you talking about Sister Lux Bruna?
We didn't name her last time.
Yeah, I can name her. This is a community. God bless them. I'm not going to mention the name of the community. People are going to have to dig deep into all of our shows.
The archives.
And they're going to have to pull out little nuggets along the way. Got that? Along the way? Nope.
Nice.
There you go.
Thank you.
Little segment, right?
Yeah. Little
segue.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to pull little nuggets out along the way and piece together exactly this community that my family lived with for 3 years. But I said it. So Lux Bruna, beautiful, beautiful soul, wonderful, consecrated religious sister. And she was just so focused on her relationship with Christ. And, you know, we all know people who we just scratch our heads because it's like, are they paying attention to what, you know, it's like if you walk out into the street, you need to pull these people back before they get run over by a car because their mind is just somewhere else. Well, Sister Lux Bruna, God bless her, she was so deep into a relationship with Jesus that she would just not really be connecting the dots with stuff going on around her, such as, like we talked about last week, driving down the road on the property. It was a dirt road, driving down the road on the property in a old beaten up Jeep Wrangler, and one of the wheels is just ready to fall off because it was only being held on by one lug nut. And I'm watching the whole vehicle wobbling and, you know, going up and down inside. She had no idea. She probably thought the road was just filled with potholes and bumpy. So that's the background for those of you that missed last week.
It was her inspiration, I think, Deacon, that really got me to thinking that I have talents, I have gifts, and maybe it's time to start using them a little bit better. So thank you for your help last week. But this week, I think the stuff that we're talking about this week kind of ties into what we were talking about last week.
Oh, absolutely. You know, listen, we've all been in that space where, you know, especially us guys, we've all been in that space where we say to ourselves, oh, I could do this. I don't need anybody's help. I can do this. Unfortunately, more often than not, we just screw it up or we get hurt. That's usually what happens to me. I mean, I've gotten hurt so many times. My shoulders are shot. I mean, they're shot. Just thinking that I could accomplish more than I can, you know, from a physical perspective. But the problem, though, is, okay, it's easy for us guys to see some physical obstacles, some physical whatever that we have to overcome. And so, you know, you fight, you claw, you bite, kick, punch, you claw your way through it. And, you know, okay, so you get injured, you know, you get hurt on the other side. It'll heal eventually until you get to be our age, right? And then nothing heals.
Nothing heals.
Nothing heals. You learn to live with the pain. You know, I was giving a homily last weekend, and I was talking about suffering. And it's like, you know, there was this priest that I found on the internet. Man, I got to find it. I got to get his name. This elderly guy. and he was talking about, his own sufferings. And he had commented, and it blew me away when he talked about this. I gotta get this guy's name. But he talked about how, he went on like a retreat or part of his prayer life. He spent 2 weeks, metaphorically, prayerfully, spent 2 weeks in the garden with Jesus during his agony. And he talks about having this conversation with Jesus. And he says to Jesus in prayer, he says to Jesus, "Are we alone?" And Jesus says, "Yes, we're alone." And Jesus says to him, "Everyone has abandoned me." And it's just like the way that he talked about this. It's like, wow, how many times have we abandoned Christ because of our own selfishness? And so this priest in prayer, he says to Jesus, because he sees him suffering, the story unfolds of the sweat appearing as droplets of blood and, the whole agony. And so this priest says to Jesus, "Give me more pain. Give me your pain." And so, he endures even greater sufferings. And then later on, he talks about how because of the pain that he endured and allowed himself to endure for Christ, not for some selfish macho reason, I want to have people admire me, so I'm going to shoulder my pain and suffering well in public view so that I can be admired. No, no, no. This was all for Jesus. And so in prayer, this priest tells us that Jesus said to him that because he accepted this burden of suffering, 5 million souls have been released from purgatory. And it's very emotional if you really think about the role that we are invited to play, the role that we're invited to live, and how you would think, well, what can I do? I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. But it's not true. It's really not true. We all have pain. We all have illnesses and abnormalities and sufferings and whatever. We all have something. The big question is what's going to be your attitude towards that? Are you going to be angry and resentful and point fingers and blame? Or are you going to recognize that the suffering that I am enduring is actually an opportunity? Now, I'm not saying that we should behave recklessly. I'm not saying that we should have this attitude of I'm going to put myself in circumstances and situations that will cause me harm. That's pride, actually. Now you're talking about pride because you're looking for the personal benefits of public recognition as a result of it. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. What I'm talking about has to do with whether or not you're going to accept the sufferings that you have for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of the salvation of souls. And that, not only is that souls that are in purgatory, but how about the souls of your children? How about the soul of your wife, your husband, your parents? I heard it said once before, I may not have gotten the family that I wanted, but perhaps I've gotten the family that I need. All of us can find some kind of complaint about how we were raised by our parents or relatives. All of us can find some kind of complaint. But what exactly are we complaining about? I think if we really think about our lives, and if we think about how tough we might have it, there's plenty of people that have it much harder than we do. And so, Dave, we talked about this a lot, especially, off the air. We've talked about our future together and our desires and the blessings that we've received. I mean, in a very short period of time, our conversation has been picked up by well over 80 radio stations across the country, including secular radio, not just Catholic. We've also developed a very strong relationship with two of those radio stations, Salt and Light Radio and Divine Mercy Catholic Radio, one out of Boise, Idaho, the other one out of Melbourne, Florida. very strong relationship with those two radios. And we can feel really, really good about the fact that we even have a coffee company that has decided to support us, Christian Kitchens Coffee. And we're in the process now of making available to our listeners some coffee blends that are inspired through the shows that we do.
And they will help to support the show.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so that's a really cool thing. Every bag of coffee that's sold, we get a few shekels in the kitty, which would definitely help us so that we could, maybe start traveling a little bit and appear in different places and bring the conversation live to a group. So, but it's scary, it's scary, am I good enough for this? Am I worthy? What's going to happen? Like the other, the shoe's going to drop, right? Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something's going to go wrong. I'm going to get blamed for something. This is the devil attacking us. And it probably should be expected. It should probably be expected. But the conversation that we're going to have today, that we're going to now start getting into, what does it mean to have a relationship with the Holy Spirit? What's the benefits of that? That's really who we need to have solidly in our lives in order to combat all this other stuff that I've been talking about. That's definitely what we need. Because, we've talked about spiritual warfare in the past. We've talked about, if we could just like boil it down really simple, we've talked about how, Lucifer was presented with his job, and we've learned from some of the exorcists exactly what Lucifer's job was going to be, which was to illuminate and bring to light the interior beauty of the Blessed Mother. And when Lucifer was shown his job, he realized that being that he was a seraphim angel, top dog in the whole hierarchy, he knew that he would never be number one. He would always be second best to Mary, to the Blessed Mother. And he refused to accept that. So he said no to his job. And that no was absolute. And that no broke open the war in heaven when he declared, I will not serve her. And so that whole thing, that broke. And so after that, the whole war in between heaven and earth, the whole war between the angels and the demons, the whole war between God and Lucifer, the whole war really has to do with us. That's the bottom line. The demons that followed Lucifer, they just could not accept the idea that a creation which was made a little bit inferior to the angels would then be valued and elevated in relationship above the angels. That concept of being created beneath the angels, but then elevated above the angels, was something that these creatures, these people, because they are people, they're people without bodies, something that they just couldn't handle, something that Lucifer just couldn't handle. And so really the war has to do with how many of God's beloved, meaning humanity, how many of God's beloved can I get to turn against him? That's really what it is. We are the tool and the prize for Lucifer. Every time a person turns away from God, turns away from Jesus, and I've said this I don't know how many times, the devil does not care if you worship him. The devil does not care if you adore him, if you directly spend your time on nothing but Satan. That's not his intention. His intention is very simple. Anything but Jesus. It's really that simple. Anything. Bury yourself in work instead of going to church on Sunday? Great. Anything but Jesus. Bury yourself in philanthropy where you're doing good deeds, but you don't pray, you don't worship God, you don't go to church, you don't spend time before the Blessed Sacrament, you don't spend time in your daily devotions giving thanks to God? Perfect. Anything but Jesus. Spend time making money so you can take your family on vacations over and over and over again, but you're not going to church, you're not worshiping God? Perfect. anything but Jesus. Provide your children with everything they could ever possibly want, but never get them baptized, never teach them about the love of God, never teach them about forgiveness and reconciliation with Christ. Perfect. Anything but Jesus. So that's why this is a big deal. The Holy Spirit is who we turn to because the Holy Spirit comes with particular gifts. The Holy Spirit comes with 7 gifts, and these 7 gifts produce fruit. So if we understand the difference, so think of it kind of like this. Think of it like ingredients in the kitchen. So the 7 gifts could be considered like 7 major ingredients: flour, sugar, milk, eggs, right? Just think of it like that. The fruit, when you combine these gifts, when you use these gifts, when you put these gifts into action, the fruit is going to be bread, cake, all kinds of other delicious, wonderful things, right? So if we take a look at the Holy Spirit, we have 7 particular gifts of the Holy Spirit, and we'll talk more about these in detail when we come on the other side of the break. But we have the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit: wisdom, understanding, counsel, otherwise known as right judgment, fortitude, otherwise known as courage, knowledge, piety, otherwise known as reverence, and fear of the Lord, otherwise known as wonder and awe. So those 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, think of them as 7 tools in the toolbox. And when you learn how to use each one of those tools in your daily life, keeping you oriented towards Christ, as opposed to being oriented towards the world, then you're able to do basically 2 things: push the devil back, or one of his minions that are in your life throwing temptations. I had the most bizarre thing, and the exorcists have talked about this. I'm not gonna speak on specifics because it's actually quite disgusting and embarrassing. But I've been attacked I've been tempted. I've had devil throw some out of left field, where did that come from, thought into my mind right in the middle of prayer. Really bizarre stuff. It's like, where did that come from? But that's exactly what they do. You see, the devil's, when we were created, God assigned us a guardian angel. And I guarantee you the devil's got a couple of his buddies watching us also. And so we're the prize. Our soul is the prize. Anything but Christ, right? And so from the moment we come into the world, the fight is on. And this is why it's so important to get baptized, because now you're part of the family. God can protect you so much better once you're baptized, because part of baptism is also your family is agreeing to raise you up in the church, raise you up according to the faith. And so all of this stuff is important. But right from the beginning, the devil is watching you and keeping notes. Oh, you better believe it. Later on in your life, when you thought you got past that, whatever that might have been, the devil's going to throw those thoughts back into your mind. No matter what you try to do, the devil is going to continuously try to throw back your past. I like to refer to those as the shadows of sin. And the devil is really, really good at taking stuff that you've confessed, stuff that you've been absolved from. And like I said, I like to refer to them as the shadows. It's not real. There's no actual power or form to it. It's a shadow. But the devil will take that shadow and throw it back into your mind and start pushing buttons, seeing if the devil can get you to trip up. And the first step in tripping up is taking that shadow and dwelling on it, thinking about it, remembering, and to go even as far as reimagining it. And so that becomes a problem, because the more you do that, the more he's drawing you towards him, away from Christ. And so the gifts of the Holy Spirit give us that opportunity to fight back against a lot of this stuff, a lot of it. And then, it's not just simply, okay, I fought the fight. Now I'm laying here a bloody, beaten up mess and I feel horrible. No, actually, what happens is then you have what's known as the fruits of the Holy Spirit. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing the way the system works. So God recognizes that you're going to be fighting a battle every single day. He gives you the tools to get through the moment. And then he sends comfort to you to help you recuperate so you can get back into the fight, because the fight never ends, right? You may feel really good for the rest of today or for a portion of today, but tomorrow is going to be another battle. There have been saints in the church that have actually talked about it, and it's been documented that their battle with evil, their battle with the devil, has risen far above just having thoughts come back into their minds, battling with the shadows. St. Padre Pio, it's been documented that he would be physically thrown around his bedroom where he was living, physically thrown around his room. People would hear him yelling and being thrown against the wall, and he'd come out of it actually bruised. And no, these are not self-inflicted bruises. Anybody that knows about Padre Pio, one of the beautiful gifts that Jesus gave him, because again, like I said earlier, his attitude very much was, Lord, give me more pain. Let me feel what you feel. And some of the gifts that Padre Pio had, one in particular, was that people would go to him for confession. And let's say you go into the confessional, and we've all done this. You go into the confessional, and let's say to make it real easy, let's say there's 5 things that you need to confess. And one of them is really embarrassing, and you're very hesitant in saying it. Padre Pio had the gift of being able to look into people's hearts, and he'd be able to see the sins. And by looking into their heart, he was able to draw out of the person so the person can give a really good confession. What an incredible gift for a priest to have. Because I know I've been there where I go into the confessional and I'm embarrassed to say what needs to be said. I'm happy when I do say it because it's very, very cleansing, but in the moment I'm embarrassed to talk about it. The other gift that Padre Pio was given by Christ is called the stigmata. And actually, Dave, in a future show, we should talk about all of the various miracles of the church, stigmata, the Eucharist, the Eucharistic miracles. We should talk about that at a future episode. But
those are definitely tools that men can use to
big time
defend, or weapons to defend the faith.
Yeah, and so Padre Pio, he was given the stigmata, which is a visible and unexplainable perpetual wound that he had in his hands, he had it on his feet, and he also had it in his side. He had the wounds of Christ, and it was unexplained. And I believe when he died, the wounds healed, or at least I think the wounds all healed at the point of his death.
Mm-hmm.
He stopped bleeding, and the wounds healed, but he had them for years and years. And so the comfort that Jesus gives us, the comfort that we receive through the Holy Spirit, is known as the fruit of the Holy Spirit. And yeah, we'll talk more about this also on the other side of the break, but the fruits of the Holy Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, some of what I read should be familiar because we've spoken about the fruits in another context. We've spoken about the fruits in the context of virtue. And if we understand virtue, and we understand how virtue are we can say the tools, if you will, of the angels of virtue. So when we are building virtue, we're calling upon the angel of that virtue to work with us. And particular angels of virtue will be available to help us battle against particular demons of vice. And so that's a whole nother thing when we start, and we'll talk more about this also, but the church has identified the 7 deadly sins. And these are 7 vices that will be thrown against us. And we see it everywhere. Lust and gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride. We see that everywhere, especially pride. Pride is considered to be the foundation, the keystone, the foundation of all other sin is pride. And so when we start thinking about how is it that we want to live our life and what is it that we need to do and who do we turn to and where do we get some power to do this and to be able to see clearly and to understand clearly what we need to do to move forward, the Holy Spirit is who we turn to. The Holy Spirit is that well that we draw water out of. The thing, and we're going to be taking a break in about a minute or so, but the last thing that it's important to understand, when we talk about a particular person of the Blessed Trinity, it's important to understand that while one person in the Trinity may be highlighted more than the other 2, I guarantee you, and the church has taught this for a long time, when you get one, you get all 3. So there's never a time that if you pray to the Holy Spirit, you're not going to also get Jesus and the Father. There's never a time that when you pray to Jesus, you're not going to also get the Holy Spirit and the Father. And there's never a time that when you pray to the Father, you're not also going to get Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
That's all the time we have this week. Tune in next week at this same time for the conclusion of this broadcast.
It's a mystery. We recognize that the divine Trinity is a mystery. But it's important to understand we have 3 persons. Each person provides a uniqueness. But it's not like when you get one, you're not getting all 3. You are. But let's just say, for simplicity's sake, we're talking about the Holy Spirit today. And so we're going to be focusing on the uniqueness of what the Holy Spirit gives to us when we call upon it.
Deacon, we got to leave it right there. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the fruits and the gifts of the Spirit.
The preceding program was a Spirit of Truth Radio Arts original program for CastingThe.net.